The other day in the hallway, I had an encounter that reminded me of this belonging belief. So my student was talking with a friend of hers, and this young lady, the friend, is not a student that I've taught, but I recognized her from the hallways. And it was during passing time in classes, and this friend of my student, she said, I don't want to go into this class. This is so bad. It's a waste of my time. I don't want to be here. It's a bad day. Just kind of, picks a little storm cloud over her, just pouring rain, lightning bolts, and it was kind of spreading onto us. So I politely butt in and said, hey, you could just go in that class, ask 3 really great questions. I want you to sit there and whatever the lesson is, just try to ask 3 really great, questions that you're actually curious about. I want to challenge you to do that. And she just, launched into this 2-minute straight sort of tirade about how I don't speak up in class. I don't do that. I don't speak in front of class any way, shape, or form. I don't talk to people. I don't like people. I've got a 504. I use it to get out of anything that involves any type of public speaking. I'll be a jerk about it. I just don't do it. Yada, 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 kind of. So I was just kind of, wow, blown away. I mean, one thing that I thought is I just wish I had her in my class so that I could try to get her engaged in public speaking through a slow progression of pop-up debates that I do with all of my students at the start of the year. I just wanted to teach her. And I mentioned that, and she said, man, no, that wouldn't happen, and just kind of continued to go on about how she is the kind of person who doesn't speak publicly. And my big walkaway really was, wow, that's the power of identity. So the hard thing about the belonging belief, and I actually struggled with this writing the chapter about the key beliefs in my book, These 6 Things, is that it's kind of the belonging belief, but it's kind of also the identity belief. And you can really, I think it's helpful to think about these in 2 different ways. And I think a lot of interventions target either the belonging nature of it or the identity nature of it. So I really wanted to call it the identity belonging belief, but my editor, I think, rightly said, dude, just you can explain that, but you don't need to sit there and make this big wonky term. So I'm calling it the belonging belief, but I want to talk in this lesson about identity, the power of identity, as that young lady in the hallway clearly represented. So Daphne Oysterman is sort of my favorite identity researcher. She writes about how people, it's not just that we like to behave in what she calls identity congruent ways, to do identity congruent things. It's not just that we like to, it's that we do. We tend to do that. We unconsciously do things that align with how we conceive of ourselves. What type of person are we? And so in this book, Daphne Oysterman, I'll link to this in the Dig Deeper, she lays out a really extensive session-based intervention. And basically she's super smart. It's a great book, but I haven't tried out her intervention because it involves small groups and a handful of sessions with students, handful with parents, and she's found that it works really well, but it's a little over involved for what we're trying to accomplish in this course. But I do want to talk about James Clear. James Clear is a blogger who kind of popularizes research, sort of like Dan Coyle, who I've mentioned in some of the lessons or linked to in some of the Dig Deeper sessions. So James Clear has this article where he talks about identity-based behavior change. And his idea is this. Oftentimes when we want to change our behavior, or for you and I, change the behavior of our students, right? We want them to do things and do them with care, things that we need them to do for our class. Oftentimes, Clear says, we just target the behavior directly. But he says, rather, we need to target the identity. He says, identity is right here, and then here's behavior, and here are the results. And this is really why we want our students to behave and do the things that we want them to do, right? I want my kids to read, I want them to study, ask questions, advocate for themselves, because that's going to get them to the outcome, the results that I want, long-term flourishing. So Clear says this. He says, if you want to change the behavior of somebody, you need to change the identity. So to do that, he says, though, it's not just as simple as having your students kind of repeat the mantra like, I am a reader, I am a math student. Although I think with teacher credibility, we can do things like just say, hey, you're the kind of kid who can succeed in math. You're the kind of kid who's curious. Apply that to math. We can directly target identity by talking about it. But Clear says you really want to change identity, you need to develop small little wins. Small little wins. And so that's what I want you to think about today. How do you already, okay, or how could you try to get your students to identify as the kinds of people who do X? I do my homework. I work well with peers. In the case of my young lady that I met in the hallway, I participate in whole class discussion. I speak in front of the class. How do you do that? So for her, what I do with all my students is, at the beginning of the year, 3 weeks of think, pair, share. So you've got to talk to the person next to you, and it's simple stuff, processing the stuff that I'm talking about in the lesson. And then I randomly call on students, just using my index cards, very emotionally matter of fact, like it's not high stakes, just, I make it seem very like low key. I'll just randomly call on a handful of kids through a stack of index cards with their names on them every time that after they've had a think pair opportunity. So they think, they pair, they've maybe written about it, they've talked about it with a partner, and then I'll call on just 3 or 4 people each time to share out. And what this does is communicates to kids like that young lady, wow, in this class, speaking for the whole class to hear is normal, and I actually don't die when I do it. Like, it's not a big deal. It's really low key. I don't need to make a big deal about it in this class. And then about 3 weeks into the school year of doing think, pair, share, those really tiny wins, every single day for 3 weeks, multiple times per lesson. Then all of a sudden the kids walk in and they say, hey guys, we're going to do something today called pop-up debate. It's going to be based on what you actually just answered in your warm-up. So was the hunter-gatherer lifestyle better than our lifestyle? That's a classic one that I'll use in world history. And you already wrote about this in your warm-up today, so here's how pop-up debate works. Everyone has to speak at least 1 time, at most 2 times. To speak, you simply stand up and speak. And guys, you can just read from that sheet of paper today. You can just read a 1-sentence response to the prompt, and that's going to do it. I'm going to put this in the classwork grade, and I just want to encourage you right now to take a look at what you wrote, and let's just, before we start, do a little think pair to make sure that you sort of know what you want to say. And typically that's all that I'm going to do to introduce that initial pop-up debate. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a handful of kids at the very end who are going to need me to call on them. And so I'll just be sitting there with my clipboard, looking at my clipboard saying, okay, student A, student B, student C. And if they don't stand up, I'll say, oh, just stand up. And 99% of the time, every kid will stand up and speak. There's always those exception students that are going to require me to intervene differently. There's no silver bullets. But that's a key moment for kids who have an identity that says, I'm terrified of public speaking. It's a key moment of shaping this identity that says, I may be scared of public speaking, but I can do it. I can do it. I'm the kind of person who can do it. I do hard things in that way. I challenge myself in that way. So take a look at the reflective application. There's also some neat resources in the Dig Deeper section. And I'll see you in the next lesson.